Hi, my name is Wang. I'm a PhD student from the Department of Computer Science, University of Oxford. Today, I'm presenting a paper on Don't Make Assumptions About Me, Understanding Children's Perception of Datafication Online. Today, children are spending more time online than ever before. Online technologies are increasingly important for children, providing access to vital education, socialization, well-being, and entertainment resources. Datafication, which is the process in which children's actions online are pervasively recorded, tracked, aggregated, analysed, and exploited by online services in multiple ways that include behavioural engineering and monetisation, is also becoming increasingly common in the online world today. At the core of this datafication is online services' ability to make data inference on users, that is, to analyze data supported by algorithms with the aim to evaluate certain personal aspects relating to a natural person, in particular to analyze or predict aspects concerning that natural person's performance at work, economic situation, health, personal preferences, interests, reliability, behavior, location, or movements. Such datafication is practically impossible to avoid or undo through deletion. However, we know very little about how children feel about such practices and how they perceive datafication. In this paper, we used YouTube as an example datafication platform for its popularity and conducted one-to-one semi-structured interviews with 48 children between 7 to 13 years old, specifically asking two research questions. How much do children understand about the online datafication practices, and what are their perceptions? In part 1 of the interview process, we chose to walk through a series of tasks with our participants on their own devices for the purpose of recreating and reminding them of their everyday experience on YouTube. As children were going through these tasks, they were also invited to explain their understandings about and experiences of certain technological terminologies, such as homepage, autocomplete, autoplay, and personalized advertisements. In the second part of the interview, we chose to present the children with two videos about a fictional character named Lola, a 10-year-old girl who likes to watch videos on YouTube, and how she learns about the data collection and processing. In the videos, we use metaphors and compare the collection and processing of children's data against throwing bottles of Alexa into a magic pot. So how children perceive what data is collected and what happens to these data then? Our results show that while all children knew that YouTube would collect data from them, however, they had different perceptions in terms of what data was being collected, and such perceptions were often related to whether they think such data was essential or personal. There was a strong theme of discussion around what data children considered as their personal data. Interestingly, we found a common thinking among children regarding who owns their behavioral data online, such as videos they watched, terms they searched. A surprising amount of them thought that it was YouTube or the platform that owned their data or had the rights to these data. Meanwhile, we found that many children thought the only reason why online platforms would collect and process their data was just for offering them better services. Finally, a key theme emerged was children's perception about where these data about them went. The majority of them believed that the data were collected by a certain platform would only be used by the platform locally. Following children's perception of the general datafication practices online, we further investigated their understanding and perceptions of the data inference practices. To start with, most children describe data inference as the process in which YouTube is trying to make guesses and assumptions about people, as well as categorizing people into certain groups based on what is inferred about them. On the other hand, almost all children only mention the possibility of YouTube using data generated from their interactions on YouTube. None, meanwhile, mentioned the possibility of YouTube using other data sources, such as what they did on other websites. During our interview, we used two hypothetical scenarios to establish a deeper conversation with children about their perceptions and how platforms could make inference about them. The first scenario illustrated how YouTube would send personalized advertisements on things of different prices to different children, and the second one showed how YouTube could send advertisements on Barbie dolls and makeups to girls, and send advertisements on science books and robotic toys to boys. When reflecting on these scenarios, children show strong oppositions against platforms conducting data inference on them, describing such inference as spying on them without them knowing. However, when being taken outside the scenarios and asked to reflect on their own experience, it was interesting to see that the exact same children who demonstrated different feelings and values, as well as critical thinkings before, were unable to relate such thinking to their own everyday experience on YouTube. For example, many of them did not think or weren't aware that data inference practices could happen in their own lives. On the other hand, for the children who have had some real-life experience before, they were more alert of such practices. When discussing future mechanisms, almost all children mentioned that they want to be able to stop data being collected and processed and used in ways that were unknown to them, mainly through two types of mechanisms: transparency and control. However, almost all children were pessimistic in a sense that they think companies wouldn't change anything at all because they would only care more about money. This paper is the first to contribute an understanding of the perceptions of children on the datafication and the more specific data inference practices that dominates their information consumption online. We identified three key knowledge gaps in children's perceptions, including their lack of recognition of who are involved in the data processing and how data are being transmitted across platforms, and their data ownership. Our findings provided crucial insights for the recent critical algorithmic literacy development, confirming the urgency of extending children's cognitive computational thinking. Through situating our finding under the critical algorithmic literacy lens, our findings have provided important immediate indications regarding how we could better support children in the datafied society through more transparency and autonomy-supportive designs, as well as identify the need for a fundamental shift of the current data governance structure. We hope that our findings will support both designs for children as well as those of educational material thinking to address gaps in their understanding of datafication practices online, and finally, lay down the foundation for more ethical data governance structure in the future. Thank you so much for listening.